Hey y'all. So I wanted to talk today about the process of learning math and how that changes the way that you see the world. So before I learned math, my primary language was English. It's a language I was grown up to speak, right? And so I interfaced with the world through English alone. So for example, if I saw a tree, then, I'd view it as a tree. Like this here, I view it as a handrail, you know. And so all the kind of objects in the world around me, I kind of attached words to them, which are like categories to kind of interface with the world. It's a highly efficient tool and a highly um, um, powerful tool for human society to be able to communicate, be able to spread knowledge, past experiences, etc. And it's one of the things that sets us apart as a species. But learning math um, kind of was a very disassociative process because I remember that there were times during my undergraduate math career where I was studying math so often that I I was speaking math. If you think of math as like a language, I was speaking math like more often than I was even speaking the English language. And so I was starting to kind of disassociate from English as like my primary way of interfacing with the world. And it was somewhat subtle. I mean, there's obviously I still interact with the world through the English language on a day-to-day basis, and if I didn't, um, I mean, it's impossible to kind of undo the memory, my learned experience of interfacing with the world through the English language. But the point is that there are these moments in math where you see the world differently. You see the world, for example, through the second law of thermodynamics, through entropy, through fluid dynamics, through classical mechanics, for example, or general relativity. You can kind of see the world around you and it's evolving and kind of happening in a way that is way beyond the English language's ability to like categorize it, right? It's a more kind of dynamical, like the mathematical description is more like, I don't know, like mystical or like um, deep somehow. Um, Whereas in English, we just describe things with words. We just put a label on things around us. Math and physics proclaim to actually be able to predict the underlying mechanics of what we're observing. So it's not just a word; it's literally the physical laws of the world around us, and these mathematical ideas. They're generating not only what we observe in the present moment, but also like the future and the past. Um, and so this process for me was very transformative, and it almost changed my sense of self, my sense of identity, because previously I kind of identified with myself through the lens of the English language, and I had all these character qualities and like my own self image and my own self narrative, and everything I thought about who I was as a person was kind of mostly encoded within the English language. Now when I learned a new language like math, all of a sudden I could no longer encode my sense of self within the mathematical language. Math is not really like a selfish or like subjective language. It's not really, there's no difference between like the subject and the object, for example, like in the English grammar. Um, and so there's no really sense of self in math. So I couldn't like describe who I was as a person, what's my identity through the lens of mathematics. That wasn't possible. And so all of a sudden, I learned a new language for interfacing with the world. And that language was not based on a sense of self or a sense of personal identity. And so it was almost like a sort of slow form of ego death or like a slow form of like disassociation from the self to learn this new language and interact with the world through this new mathematical lens that kind of helped combat um, kind of this the English language, which had been ingrained in my mind, and so from my youth, I learned the English language. It's impossible to unlearn it, and so interface with reality through the English language. Perhaps through meditation or through spiritual practices, you can disassociate from the English language for like a few moments. Personally, for me, if I meditate, that takes a lot of training. And even then, it's almost like I'm forcing myself to like let the English language go and like I'm forcing myself to disassociate. Whereas in math, it was a natural disassociation that occurred as I learned the mathematical language applied to physics, right? And I'm by no means a very experienced in math or physics. I've only studied it intensely for the past like 5 years. But as I studied it more and more and more, and I had those days where I was speaking more math than I was English. Um, it was a slow and natural process of disassociation of the self that completely changed the way that I interact with the world, and I think made me interact with the world in a more like trippy, kind of like chaotic way, but also in a more calculated and cold way because there's this sense of like rationality and logic and justification that comes with this classical deterministic theory. But there's also a life and a chaos, um, and sort of a mystical beauty that comes with like dynamics and chaos theory and stochastic models of reality. So all in all, it's hard to even explain it to you through the English language. Of course, I'm trying to explain this change through the English language, but I think it's really impossible for me to communicate um, this new form of interfacing with reality without actually explaining the math and physics, which I'm not going to do in this video. And in fact, I can't ever fully do because at some point, you have to learn it on your own. You have to see these things for yourself, and come to maybe believe in them yourself. I mean, I think people put faith in math and science kind of like a religion. It's a different type of faith, obviously, because it's experimentally driven. But there's some amount of faith that we put in, like the mathematical axioms. Um, and but it's not just faith; it's also experimental based. Like in terms of physics and in terms of math, it's not just faith. Like we see in the real world, for example, that 1 + 1 = 2, or these more complicated physical laws. Like they're not just faith based; they're experimentally derived, or they can't be proven per se, but they can be either accepted as axioms or experimentally tested to some degree of accuracy. So, anyways, yeah, that's kind of a rant. I hope you got something from that. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments.